Are we live?
Are we live? Yeah.
Good morning. Happy Monday to Wake Up and Deliver Season 2, Episode 18. Whew. We're rocking and rolling.
We are, yeah.
Rocking and rolling. Before we dive in, let's just start off with our little bit of a brain wake up as we usually do. Our coffee for the noggin, for the cranium. I'm trying to get John to smile here. He's not happy.
Well, I'm actually trying to bring up the app so I can also answer the people in the audience. But go ahead. I'm good. I got it working. You know, my technical challenges can overcome.
What you find interesting is a better predictor of success than what you are good at. Curiosity isn't random. It's a compass.
I don't necessarily disagree with that one. I kind of like it. I guess I would just have to say is that like I'd love to meet these people who are good at things, but then also not either curious or interested about them, because to me, I think that getting better at these things and having that level of expertise usually comes from being quite interested in something. So I'm not sure. Like I said, I'd love to see the guy who's really good at something, but then is just not interested in it.
I mean,
actually, that being said, okay, I can think of a quick example right now, but I'm not going to out the person. So, okay, I retract my last statement.
Oh, now I'm curious. Curiosity.
I'll tell you after the show.
Well, we have, as everybody, good morning. Thank you for joining us. Barcelona, I'm assuming that's Kat saying hello from Barcelona. I can't see.
It is.
Kat's at the seafood conference representing Monarch Connect this week. So it should be fun. So everybody who's listening from all over and is at the seafood conference, check out Kat from Monarch Connect. She's walking around talking about conferences. This past week, John joined the Monarch Connect crew, used us as a base of operations at CL. We had a fantastic time. John had a fantastic time. It was a great show.
It was a great show, actually, and very cool from a Canadian perspective. I mean, I've told you before that I used to obviously travel a lot, and I was really surprised to see like all of the great stuff coming out of Atlantic Canada, especially. I thought that was very cool. I loved going out there in my past life, and I miss not being able to get out there regularly. So very cool to see the innovation coming out of that part of the country.
I'm gonna be honest. I didn't take a lot of pictures. We talked about this before, and I do have one picture. It's of the cheese. Lots of great cheese as always at CL. My favorite part always is the Spanish ham. I must have hit the Spanish section more than one time, eating that wonderful ham. It was a fantastic show.
Yeah, actually. So what Matt's not telling everybody is that they actually asked him to stop coming by the booth because he was eating so much. No, that's a joke. Everyone was really great at the show. The funny thing about the cheese, there's so much cheese because cheese is one of the only dairy categories that, well, fine cheese or some of those cheeses that you saw there is one of the only one that really makes money, because things like fluid milk and butters and all of these things, not always as profitable as people would think, but fine cheeses is still a home run for pretty much everybody all of the time.
I doubt someone wants to go around a conference and taste butter.
Not true. There was one of the guys from Atlantic Canada who did a really cool butter for your meats, and it was all flavored butter that came in this like push tube thing. You just push it out just like a chef at a Michelin restaurant. You slice off your medallion, throw it on your beautiful steak and grill it up. So there you go.
There you go. Other than that, I think, what was some of the other interesting aspects of CL that you found? For me, like I said, the meat section was always good. I like the regional representations in Canada. That was fantastic. Quebec always has a strong presence at CL, which is, obvious. Ontario had a good presence, like you said, the Maritimes. I didn't see anything from Western Canada though. I'd have loved to see something from BC, some better representation in the prairies. And again, they'll have not American representation this year either. Some more European-esque more than anything else at CL. What were your thoughts on that?
I did see a couple of people from Calgary, like Alberta, maybe one or two people from BC. I wonder, I don't know how much the conference timing changes or whatever, but I don't know if it was also a little bit of a conflict because they said what is it, CHFA West or whatever it was, that was very close, like the weekend before or a few days before. So it could just be people were pretty tapped out if they had just done that show and then to try to get all the way to Toronto or whatever. But
Yeah, but Seattle's the largest CPG food show in Canada, if not North America. I know the Seattle in like the food shippers is another big one, but I think it's a little bit different. This one definitely focused on the smaller niche brands, which I find it very cool.
yeah, like I said, I don't know. I mean, I could see for a lot of the smaller brands like where the challenge is. So to answer your question, I think the most eye-opening thing for me, and this isn't in any kind of critical way. This is just coming from my, my history in the food industry, but it's like a lot of brands, a lot of people, with cool products and stuff that they've built or whatever. Every one of them trying to do the same thing in sense of their go-to-market strategies, and every one of them using the same roads to get there. So what do I mean by that? A couple things. Everybody obviously wants to get into the national grocers, and that is pretty much a given, just because if you're going to really sell at scale, like you have to be in those national grocers. That said, I don't think most people really realize that your average grocery store is like, holding 60 to 80,000 SKUs at any given time, and that just getting some space on the shelf, especially if it's like 2 feet or whatever, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to hit a home run at all. And then the other big thing that I thought honestly was the most criminal and tragic part, though, for a lot of these,
This is gonna be epic.
oh yeah, criminal and tragic part for sure for a lot of these brands was just the number of them that just defaulted to using these distributors. These distributors just to me seem like the mob, honestly, straight up. It's like they're holding these people hostage, some of them paying like 35% fees, and they're using these people completely to do their distribution, to get into everything and to try to sell their product. But almost no one realized that that's like one, it's like a really losing game cost wise, because you probably don't have the margins to be able to support that forever. Plus there's all kinds of break points where you're just getting hosed for no additional work from the distributor. But realistically, it's just that, like, if you go down that road, you're not creating a lot of additional value for yourselves, right? People were going with distributors, or they were going wholesale to the grocer's warehouse. Cool. The second you get into that smaller grocery chain, that independent chain, that organic chain, that those other retailers that don't want to have you through warehouse because it's not enough volume, but are happy to have you on the store, you have zero DSD network unless you're going with these distributors, which then are going to hose you and just kill your profits.
For those who don't understand, hose is a Canadian term for taking you down an unfair street and taking your money. The distributors have their position, especially when it comes from like international brands trying to come into Canada. That makes it a bit of a difference. I think you're more inclined to talking about the domestic and North American brands that are trying to kind of break into it. But how else would you get into it if you're not using the distributor to have that salesperson there knocking on the door? Because if, John, you and I come up with the best cup of water there is, we develop the best tasting water there is, how are we going to get in front of someone like Loblaws or HEB if we don't have the distributor? You might know the buyer, but you're a small guy. You're like, what's your volume? You're like, I sold 500 liters of water last year. And they're like, come back to me when you're at 10,000.
Yeah. I don't disagree. I think that it obviously really depends on the type of product you're selling. And, if you're in the beverage space, especially, which a lot of them were that we saw, right? Super tough, like just heavy. You need to really be at scale and like whatever, super tough at the beverage space. If you're doing other types of things though, I think that you have probably more flexibility. I think that there's a lot of people that immediately go for the scale of trying to hit these grocers, i.e., I'm in, chain A versus chain B versus chain C or whatever. When in reality, they're going to have a really hard time, most likely, at scale. I think a lot more of these companies need to be stronger regionally. And I do give a shout out big time. And in all fairness, I give a big shout out to Sobeys in Quebec and to Metro in Quebec. There was a very, very similar story from a lot of people about the opportunity that those retailers and those brands or chains or banners, whatever way you want to think about it, have given people. There was almost no one who spoke the same way about Ontario or anything from other parts of Canada, a little bit in Western Canada, but again, it was still Sobeys again. So I think that that's really interesting to see which retailers essentially are really supporting new innovation and which one are just looking for the easies, like, oh, we'll get you when you've blown up, so to speak. You know what I mean?
Yeah, when the SKU is really in high demand and it makes sense. One thing I'm gonna say is, I think part of the challenge is for the distributors, you find yourself in the distribution, is the lack of out there information of who to use, where to use, and how are you going to be able to secure that position to be able to distribute to those direct to stores. Because a lot of people might have direct to store capabilities, but they might be very regionalized as well. And then it's very then hard to be like, hey, if like you said, Sobeys might have a good Eastern presence. They're like, I would love to have you into direct to store your Ontario brand, but you can't find a distributor, not even a distributor, a regional partner to be able to get that direct to store to you. That becomes a lot harder because there's not a lot of information you can access online that will points to a lot of vendors that are doing that. And what happens is you default to these bigger brands that you get stuck in this distributor model. And that's why you kind of have to maybe talk to some of your 3PL partners, because they might have solutions and that they don't always advertise about it, or they're able to kind of be like, okay, let me figure out if we can make this work, and let's focus on specific areas to do it. I know we did that recently with a few of brands that we do direct to store in the GTA, and we do that direct to store in Montreal. But it becomes, from my own experience, it becomes very harder once you outside of that core of saturation, because it's very hard to get direct to store to PEI because you don't have that big of a presence. Toronto's a lot easier to kind of develop that aspect of it.
But and this is okay. So this is one thing that, like, when I do work with like e-commerce brands, like retail kind of, consumer goods or whatever, same kind of thing that I'll tell them though, and I would say to anyone in the food industry, is that, like, if you're an emerging brand, like, I'll use Canada, but I'll flip it to the States because it's the same thing. Like, if you're from Ontario, okay, the reality is, like, own Toronto first. If you can't own a market with 10 million people, or you can't make your product work with 10 million people, you've probably got a problem. Like you know what I mean?
I don't know. I mean, there's certain things that are very niche and very specific to areas that your product might be specific for that area, right? Like the BC taste for food is a little bit different from Ontario, which is far different from the East Coast, right? So your brand might be very heavy.
But if we walk with that for a second, then you're still going to have the same problem, because if your product is that hyper regional and is that culinarily specific, when you go to Sobeys, when you go to Loblaws, when you go to a Whole Foods, when you go to Aldi, when you go to anybody, if you're that specific, you better have an answer for that question too, because they'll see it too, right? You know what I mean? So my point being is that, like, one way or another, you're going to have that problem. So how do you stack your gains? To your point, like, if I just came out with that amazing new water that for some reason it's better than every other water out there. There you go. Matt's drinking it right now. He's testing my prototype. Anyways, there. Point being though, is that if I can't work with people like yourself, and I can't approach, the chains, and you don't always have to go to the corporate stores, right? Like, think about like your Yigs, like anyone that's independent, your franchisee models. A lot of these people will have more flexibility, right? Your regional chains, right? Your smaller retailers that want to have differentiated product. If you can't start to make a go and you still can't get a buzz, especially with all of the social media and all of the opportunity that you have these days to create awareness for your product relatively cheap compared to what it used to be, let's call it 10 years ago. I don't think all of a sudden popping up on a shelf in any of these retailers, and just like wrapping your whole strategy, and I call this like the field of dream strategy of like just build it or get it there and they will come, is very effective. Like, you know what I mean? You're going to be in a better position to sell through any major retailer when you can show that you have a connected community, when you can show that you've had success with smaller independent retailers,
Yeah.
and that people want you, and that you have something to bring, a value to bring to the table, rather than sort of like, this please sir, like put me on your shelf and give me a chance mentality, which way too many people were talking about at CL.
Yeah, and I find that some of the people that overlook some retail, and I wouldn't call it retail stores, but outlets to be able to put their product are places like Coutard or Rabba in Toronto. These places are very, very specific, and a lot of people do shop there in the urban areas, and they get the buzz, especially local health food stores that are very small and niche. Get your product in there first, have it displayed, because people are very specific in what they're looking for in there, and they can be very quick word of mouth development on there. But I still think places like an En Route in Canada and truck stops are very interesting places to have special products out there, because you have a lot of foot traffic of unregional people that are passing through, and they're willing to try something new as they're driving through, right? I know when I'm driving up to Toronto or I'm driving up to Montreal, different En Routes, which is like the truck stops in Ontario, have regional flavors that are from different places. And me and my son will always grab something and go from what there's Japanese snacks, there's Indian snacks, there's African snacks sometimes, and we'll try them out. We're more likely to do that on these places than I would be if I'm going to Zehrs, to the grocery store, right? It's because I'm going for something very specific.
Well, and same thing too. Like I think there's all kinds of other ways. And another thing that like I was sharing with a few people, that were at the show that had the right kind of product. Hotels, like if you want to get your product, if you really want to get some awareness for your product in a way that's not necessarily needing a high volume or whatever.
Hotels.
Find the hotels around the industrial areas, hotels around the airports, for example, anywhere where like quote unquote like senior management comes in from different areas or whatever to visit their sites, to visit their customers, to do whatever, whether it's in the airport, around the airport, like these types of places where you can kind of get this like added value, or you can hit above the belt when it comes to awareness. But here's a good example. Truff, right? Have you seen Truff? Like the hot sauce brand?
Nope.
So Truff is a
TRUFF?
Yeah. So it's a successful, now very successful hot sauce brand, and it's like premium, and it's honestly, most people will probably be like, it's way too expensive for what it is. They put truffle oil and things like that in hot sauce and whatever. It's actually got a pretty decent taste, and it's unique. There you go. So these guys started as a direct-to-consumer brand. They built a huge following and stuff like that. Now you can find them on the shelves of major retailers and stuff. But I can guarantee you, as someone that used to sit around that table and have some of these conversations or whatever, that it is way easier to have a conversation with your Whole Foods or with your Loblaws or with your Trader Joe. Well, Trader Joe's a bad example. Aldi's a bad example because these guys don't do they do all private label. But with your Walmarts or whatever, when you actually have a brand value to bring on your own, and now they have something that they want from you rather than you just being the one taking from them.
Yep.
Right? And these guys like easy to find. And I think their stuff's like $20 a bottle on the shelf for some of them. It's nuts.
$17.98. That's spot on. I don't even know if that's American or Canadian, but
I think it's American actually. So I think it's usually up here is like $23.
And that's a good point. But the other avenues that you have is obviously the one that a lot of people don't talk about either is vending machines. Go to a vending machine, especially if there's new vending machines out there that are cold sensitive, like you can have your product in refrigerated, and people will be more likely to do it because they're going to laundromat and all these different places. But the key thing that we're not talking about here, John, is how do I get that product into those spots? Like, how do I get my product into those spots when it's hard enough to get a distributor and I'm not a logistics expert, besides obviously calling Monarch Connect and Optimal for advice and how to do it, because we're all innovative here. But how do we go about doing it? If they listen to us, like, yeah, I'm going to throw it into one of those gas stations that you guys were talking about. How do I get it delivered there? Because they need at least 3 skid minimum. I have 6 boxes.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there can be a host of different things. In all fairness, though, I actually do think, and I pitched this to like people that work with Costco, and I pitched it to people that work with like Loblaws up here in Canada and stuff like that. I really do think almost every grocer and retailer out there is wildly missing an opportunity for showcasing and incubation. I think that people would respond very, very well if in most stores there was a section of rotating and in and out products just for exposure that was specifically meant for, new products, innovative products, like, you know what I mean? Where they could essentially go check it out, and there might be, 16 feet dedicated to 5 brands, 6 brands, 10 brands, whatever it could be, like depending on the layout of your stores, and having more people bring it in. That said, I mean, I think that that's where you do need to be strategic about, okay, where are my core cities? Like, okay, let's just use like something like,
yeah, but the retailers, you've said it before, the retailers, you pay for the space. You can pay thousands of dollars for that space. So as a retailer, why would I give an innovation spot where I can put in a big brand like P&G, who's going to take out my whole section, pay me millions of dollars? I'm going to have a better ROI any day of the week.
Because at the end of the day, I like, what's it worth to you to have people actually talking about you, or to actually speak, like wanting to choose you over, like, for example, wanting to choose like going into Walmart versus Loblaws? You know what I mean? Like what does that start to become worth?
Yeah, but that's not the mentality that they're having, right? And that's the challenge, I think, that we're talking about. These places are not having the mentality of how do we differentiate ourselves? Is how do we get what everybody's talking about is the lowest price for the cheapest product right now, right? Because everybody's cost saving.
That I do agree, but I mean, to be honest with you, I think most of these guys don't lean in enough to the fact that they should just be assaulting the next area of food, which is, I know it's going to sound bad because like I do work in last mile and gig work and all this kind of stuff. But if I were running a grocery chain right now, I would be attacking the restaurant industry, the meal food industry, like the meal prep industry, and all of these things. Like, you have all kinds of stuff there, and the prices are going up everywhere. So I would be really focused on getting people to explore and think more about discovery, enjoyment, entertainment, storytelling, like from the grocery store. And it's like, how do you then provide them with some of these opportunities that, like, hey, they're having a dinner party, whatever, they want to bring home something unique, they want to do something different, they want to do something special for that celebration they're doing. And I think that one mechanism to do that is through showcasing and being an incubator for innovative products that normally would have a much harder time to penetrate.
Yeah, I agree. Because I know I go to my local butcher, and that one thing they did and do is they provide like innovative products, and then they also provide a way to kind of showcase, be like, oh, you're interested in this product, let me provide like a charcuterie board of all these different meats and all these different things, and you can bring it home if you're having a party. Oh, it's Thanksgiving, we provide all the stock and everything else to make your turkey a little bit better this year, or et cetera, et cetera. So they provide these different things to try, and to help you make bundles of it with the different products that they have already to help bring you back through the door every single time. And that's another one that we don't talk about enough, is your local butcher. Like, I think retail stores are having, I guess in my own experience, I go less and less to the retail store for meat. I'll like to go to the local butcher for my meat, even though it costs a little bit more sometimes. The quality of meat is always a little bit better, and that's what I'm always kind of looking for. Like, a steak from the butcher is 10 times better than a steak from the retail store.
Funny enough, so last week when I was down there, like the GTA has more of that than Ottawa does, and like went specifically to do that. Went to the butcher, got a few different things. It was actually cheaper, to be honest with you, and it was better quality. Because the week before we had actually gone to one of the more like premium grocers for meat, and the steaks were like they were terrible. Like, honestly, I was like, wow, this is actually trash.
Yep. And I find, like, I used to, when I lived in Kitchener-Waterloo, we used to go to St. Jacob's Market, like these marketplaces, and that's another thing that we didn't talk about is farmers markets are a fantastic place for your brand to showcase. You don't have that much commitment. You showcase yourself, you put yourself out there, and you can always work with logistics providers to help bring you that product there, and provide a trailer for the day to help keep your product cooled or stored, and work with a few different other brands. But anyways, going further, like, you can go to these farmer markets and they have great quality meat because it's closer to that meat you are, or that product you are, than you are for the retailer. Because when you're buying anything, the freshness is there, but it's always better when you have it closer to when it was, quote unquote, butchered or produced or manufactured. And you can taste the difference of that. Quote Schneider, you can taste the difference quality makes.
Yeah. Wow. There you go. Master collecting is checked this morning. No, but okay. So I know we're coming up on time. So just like, I think that the message though that we're both sharing is the fact that, more brands probably going to be in a better position and going to be in a necessary position to take more control of their decisions and their strategy. Because the thing is, if you get in with these distributors, or if you get in going wholesale, your opportunities for line expansions, your opportunities to maybe keep your product on shelf, for example, can become very limited, or you can lose a huge stream of revenue from your business because you didn't hit these specific numbers, whatever, and then all of a sudden you don't have anything to fall back to, but you've already committed to that next production run, that next whatever. And more people need to really understand the fact that like CPG, especially in food, is extremely tough, typically very low margin, and you really need to sell at like high scale to be able to do well. So you got to keep that in mind about like your long-term strategies. Isn't like how do I sell a pallet? It's like, how do I sell 10 trailers of this stuff, and how quickly can I do that, either week after week or month after month or whatever it is.
Well, I was going to say, there's one thing that we didn't talk about. Maybe we should talk about it next week, but I'm just going to throw it out there. Is there's these communities out there that help support it, and John and I are part of it on Slack. There's a CPG startup community that people are out there communicating, helping each other, these brands, even though they might be in competition, of ways to kind of do these things and support one another. One thing you got to be careful of: don't sell on these networks, because you'll get banned. I'm not going to say who, but sometimes
banned. I think some of these people, like in terms of like, it's funny. Okay, I'll put my one gripe out there though, is that like, I think the one thing, and this is if I know I'm connected to the people running the one that you're talking about, if you're going to allow people to solicit once someone makes a request, i.e. I'm a brand, hey, does someone have XYZ service available? And you're going to allow the thread then to explode with people selling, you also should most certainly allow education ahead of time, because I think it is very irresponsible to see someone frame something that is they're not understanding something, or they're missing something, and then to allow the vultures to come in the comments. I don't agree with that at all.
And I think that's part of the challenge also on LinkedIn and other platforms is the misinformation in the groups and the misinformation that people put out there, the automatic chat bots that automatically just scrape through information and regurgitate it out, and you don't know if it's true or not because you don't have experience, and it sounds about right, goes out there, and it creates this perpetual misinformation out there. We got a lot to kind of talk about today. This has been all over. I think it was a very, very good conversation.
Yeah, it's funny. And guys, that's the kind of stuff that I think is probably my takeaway, at least, or like my share for you guys to think about this week, is the stuff that comes up. Like, so that Matt and I don't really plan particularly. Like, we have a few things that we'll want to talk about or whatever, but these shows are most certainly not scripted, as you can tell by we constantly have issues and whatever. But the amount
we have fun.
We have fun, but the amount of stuff that we talked about, just even at CL, the amount of stuff that starts coming up in the moment. We were talking to a really cool brand that was doing something out of Nova Scotia and stuff like that, and we just happened to. This was funny. Like, I was talking to the guy, and then Matt and Kat walked around, and we all just kind of bumped in, and we started having this conversation. That conversation, what we shared with that person, would not have come up at all if they were like, "Oh, I don't want to talk to anybody," or "I don't want to get into those conversations," because I know it sometimes can feel frustrating or uncomfortable. It's like, oh, I'm talking to someone like myself or like Matt, we do services, and we provide service obviously to people. And it's like, well, I don't want to talk to you because then I don't want to owe you anything. But it's like, you don't owe us anything. And if you're not having the conversation, sometimes you don't know what you don't know. And even if it's not something that we end up working together, if I say something that ends up helping you out, that's amazing. Take it, run with it, make your business better. But you most certainly will never know if you don't engage in the conversations and just kind of like put your head down and keep trying to do what you've always been doing. Yeah.
Part of our takeaway that we always try to do at conferences is not try to solicit customers, is build relationships. That's our only objective ever, is at the conferences, is build relationships, get to know people, and learn. Because the more we know about products, the better we become. And the more they learn about us, the better they become as well, because they learn on different services, different things. And that conversation about the East Coast Nova Scotia brand was a great example, because he thought that you needed to have a certain relationship with a retailer to be able to deliver to them. And like, nah, I don't think you do. Yeah. Not for direct to store, maybe to their DC, but we can deliver direct to store without that relationship. And that could pivot for him or for that brand to be far more successful, because they didn't know, or they weren't looking into it, or someone told them something and it wasn't true.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the takeaway. Something to think about for everybody. I know we're at time, so
we're always respectful of everybody's time. As on that note, and we had our final thoughts. Thank you everybody for joining us. Same dock, same loading time, unloading time, I guess. Next week. Yeah, have fun. See everybody.
Bye.